All right. So what's up, everybody? Thanks for clicking this video. Thanks for tuning into my channel. My name is Simon Hill, Black American from Louisiana, coming to you live from Budapest, Hungary. Today is July 19th. Episode 61 will get done today, and I'm here with my beautiful wife. Say hi, boo.
Hi everyone, I'm AKDI and I'm from Turkey, and we're here to talk about this docu-series today.
Yes, another true crime documentary that will be reviewed. We are reviewing the three-part miniseries from HBO called Savior Complex that was released in September 2023, directed by a woman. I forgot her name, Jackie Jesko, yes. And it covers the story of this woman named Renee Bach, who went to Uganda from America to start a feeding program for children and ended up becoming a unlicensed medical clinic that was basically trying to treat malnourished children without any real medical experience from Renee. So yeah, going into this, I was thinking about reviewing this for a long time. I did a live stream on my channel talking about the story when it was first announced, and I'm just now getting around to reviewing the series. We watched it in its entirety yesterday in the afternoon, and I was just taken aback by what I saw. But how did you feel after you watched it, Acti?
Yeah, I felt like similar to what you were feeling as well. Like I felt taken aback. There were a lot of questions in my mind, just questioning the ethical, you know, things about this story. And I also liked how they portrayed the story because it sort of gave like a neutral answer. Like there wasn't any clear answer at the end whether if, she was to blame for everything that happened, or if people were like exaggerating things, or what were her like, real motivations behind this and things like that. There are things that are certain, yes, but I feel like the document makes it so that you can have arguments for both sides.
Yeah, and that's what I feel like is the problem with this documentary, because I'll be honest, going into it, I was thinking that this was just going to be the story of this woman who went to Uganda and opened up a clinic, and then babies were just dying left and right. And that's not what happened. But what I'm more disturbed about is that she went there and didn't care about actually trying to follow like the same rules she would follow if she were in America. Like she knows she couldn't just get away with opening a medical clinic in America or any other country like Western white country and think that she could just say, I'm now a nurse. I now know how to treat malnourished children, all of that stuff. That was the issue for me.
I mean, I think they mentioned that as a critique in the documentary, saying that, she's a neo-colonialism. I mean, they're not saying it, but they're saying that other people said that. Mm-hmm. And then also sort of insinuating that she was like experimenting there without any permission and whatnot. So I think there was that critique there as well.
Right. Well, let's jump into the story and let's just get into it. So there's only 3 episodes to this story, and each episode is about 1 hour long. The first episode is basically us getting introduced to Renee. We see her like cooking in the kitchen with her black adopted daughter from Uganda named Selah, and she's asking her daughter, what do you miss about Uganda? And she says, I miss my friends. And, Renee sort of just looks sad as she continues to cook unseasoned stew. And yeah, basically Renee's story can be summed up very easily. She's one of like 5 kids that was raised in like rural Virginia. She was homeschooled most of her life, grew up in a very conservative Christian household. And by the time she was like 17, 19, whatever, something like that, she didn't know what to do after graduating high school. So she heard the call from Jesus through the voice of a sermon of a pastor to go and do missionary volunteer work in Africa. And she ends up going to Africa with some other missionary kids who were, her age, high school kids, and also, college kids who were taking a semester off or whatever. And yeah, she's in Jinja, Uganda. Basically she's there like, feeding kids, going on African safari and stuff like that. And, trying to spread the word of Jesus to the Africans, right? The film at this point does make some hints to like, how colonialism and missionary work was a part of, like, the takeover of Africa and stuff like that. But that's very briefly mentioned. We're also then introduced to the leaders of a nonprofit group called No White Saviors, which basically is like sending messages on Instagram and online through fire memes that, all of these missionaries are sort of like, coming into Africa as if they are saving the continent when really they're only doing worse, and making people believe in God to justify their existence. Right. And so basically Renee is like, she works there in Uganda for a few years, at a few nonprofits and stuff like that. She ends up starting her own organization called Serving His Children. She buys a big house in the middle of Jinja, Uganda, while all the other Ugandan people live in slums and stuff like that. And she starts feeding the kids, right? Feeding them basically rice and beans and stuff like that. And her organization starts to get really big. And one of the regional hospitals in Jinja, Uganda, that treats malnourished children says to Renee, like, hey, can you start, helping some of our kids that are malnourished because we're overrun. And so Renee is like, sure, yeah, let's do it. And so the hospital sends a few kids over there who are really malnourished. And so then Renee decides, you know what, this isn't just going to be a feeding program where we feed kids rice and beans and give their mothers a place to stay. We're going to actually turn into a malnutrition clinic. So she cancels the feeding program and then decides that she's now going to be trying to do, real medical treatment for malnourished children in Uganda. And one of the girls in America who comes to Serving His Children, her name is Jamie, if I remember right. She is an actual nurse. She just finished nursing school. She's a part of the whole Christian missionary culture as well. She comes to Serving His Children and sees that, Renee is over here injecting IVs into kids and, giving them medicine without, the proper dosage or anything like that. And she is just like, whoa, what is happening here? And the episode ends with the director asking Jamie, do you think Renee is a murderer? And she can't give a solid answer. So, yeah, that's basically the entire first episode. What did you think of it in general?
Yeah, just to add to the summary, we also got introduced to like this Ugandan nurse called Constance, and she also worked for Serving His Children as well. But okay, so right off the bat, I hate her because the motivation for me is very important when it comes to like this type of humanitarian charity work. And she's like basically saying, oh, Jesus, like, I saw it in my dream. Jesus said it to me and stuff like that. And I don't think like when you come with that sort of mindset, I think like neo-colonialism and this sort of stuff is inevitable.
Now, I have to ask you, I'm sorry to interrupt, but I have to ask you, what do you think about missionary work, like in general? Do you think it's a good thing, negative thing? Should it not be done? What do you think?
I hate it. I mean, I'm not really good with religion either. So, it's understandable for me to hate it, but I just think it's so selfish to be like sort of mind washing and sort of like mentally forcing people into like your religion. Because like just let everyone be whatever they want to be, believe in whatever they want to believe. Like if you believe in Christianity and you want to live your life by Jesus, like with every breath you take, that's fine. But like don't come into my business. And like I met missionaries in Istanbul, Turkey.
Wow. Mormons? Were they Mormons?
I'm not sure, but because I didn't realize they were missionaries. And then because I never met missionaries before, they were in our school as well. They came into the university and they weren't studying there. And they showed us like these pictures of light and trees and asked us like, what do you see? And then they told like, I see Jesus there. And stuff like that. And then they told me like, oh, okay, so if you like this, we're doing stuff like this every Sunday. We have a free breakfast, da-da-da-da. If you want, you can join. And I was like, okay, cool, maybe I'll join. Like, I didn't get the whole thing because they mentioned Jesus a few times. So I just thought, okay, they're like normal Christian Americans.
Now,
And then,
some people might say, like, missionaries do good. Like, okay, they came to your school and tried to, like, introduce y'all to Jesus, but they would also say, they go to Africa and feed hungry kids. They try to help people that are in need. What do you think about that?
yeah, but I think, like, when you go for Christianity and spreading the message of Jesus along with ending hunger, I guess, like, quote unquote, it's like for the wrong motivation, because I think, volunteering like this should have the message of, we want to end this system where some people are like
Malnutritious.
yeah, some people don't have enough food, some people are just very poor to do anything, they're trying to survive. I think the motivation should be against the system and not with the system. And I
Hmm.
think when you're like, when you have this sort of organizations, missionaries, I think it's with the system.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's my problem with it. What do you
I,
think?
Yeah, that's a good point. My only issue with the missionary work that Christian American missionaries bring is that they're bringing white Jesus 99% of the time. And that was in the film, right? Like the woman who was the founder of White Saviors, the black woman, she was saying like, yeah, when I was growing up in Jinja, the missionaries would come, they would all be white and they looked like the white Jesus on the wall. So I was thinking to myself, if the God is white, Jesus is white, then why did he make us this? And she said she had so many questions. And I think, the issue is not that they're going there trying to convince people to believe in Jesus. It's that they're convincing people to believe in white Jesus, which has a detriment to the minds of non-white people all across the world.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's continuing like white supremacist beliefs and then
Hmm.
using religion to do this and
Yeah.
sort of like play with people's, beliefs. I mean, I don't know
Yeah.
what to say. It's just, for me, it's horrendous. I don't like it.
I got you. I got you. Now, what do you think about like Renee adopting, Selah, and this black girl is taken out of her country and forced to live with Renee in America? Like, how do you feel about white people in general, like adopting black kids, but then also specifically towards Renee's situation?
I don't think there's any problem white people adopting like different races of kids, but I think there would be a problem in the way they are raised.
Hmm.
So they should be raised in accordance to their heritage and their race, and they should be aware of like certain racial structures, even the ones they have in their family.
Hmm.
So if that is provided and if the white parent is like educated on the concept of white supremacy and like racial injustice, I think it's totally fine. But like the problem is most of the time it's not. Like Renee did not know what neocolonialism was.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I
That's
doubt
bad.
that she talks about racism with her daughter, for
Yeah.
example.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. She is totally unaware. Like, in this case for Renee, like, black children should not be raised by her. Like, seriously. Like, she's gonna tell them, oh, no, don't see color. Like, oh, people are just bad or good. There's no such thing as racism. Like, I'm pretty sure Selah is hearing that in the house. So I actually feel kind of bad for that little girl.
Yeah.
I think 90% of the time, white Americans are not equipped to raise black kids. That's just my opinion, though.
Yeah, true, because they're also not given the appropriate education in their schooling
Yeah,
about like white supremacy and the history of America and things like that.
yeah, right.
So like it's kind of normal that they would lack in that department as well, but
Yeah,
they could educate themselves always.
yeah.
And I think Renee was looking at it in terms of like, oh, like she would have just been an orphan in Uganda.
Hmm.
Maybe she would have died, things like that. And now at least because I adopted her, it's like she's safe. She's going to grow up in like this, the one of the biggest countries in the world, right? The
Hmm.
best
Hmm.
countries in the world.
Yeah.
But yeah, like compared to death, of course that's better.
Hmm.
But that doesn't mean like she has the right to, raise a child that's just so connected with who she is.
Yeah, yeah. There's gonna be a lot of cultural disconnect for Selah growing up black in this all-white town in America, which has a long history of racism. It's gonna be, interesting for her. I just pray for her and hope she finds her way.
Yeah. I mean, when they showed her like later and she was talking, she had like an American accent.
Yeah.
So I think she will grow up as like an American kid, honestly. Of course, maybe she will remember like her time in Uganda, but like she was a baby.
Right.
So
Right.
yeah, maybe that's something that she'll go back to later in life.
Right. 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 Well, any other comments about episode 1?
No, I just like very much disliked her because of
Mm-hmm.
her motivations.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I don't think like she had bad intentions. I don't think
Mm-hmm.
she went there to sort of like, kill anybody or harm anybody. But just her intentions are not okay also in my book as well.
Yeah, it's one of those cases where maybe the person didn't have the intention to do it, but their negligence to their own ignorance about what they're doing is a crime in and of itself, right? Like you don't have the intention of driving and accidentally hitting a kid, but if you're on your cell phone texting, you might actually hit a kid on the road. And that's sort of like her situation. You get what I'm
Yeah.
saying?
Yeah,
What did you
definitely.
what did you think of the no white saviors and their movement and what their message was?
I thought it was interesting. Like their founders was this one Ugandan lady and then one white American lady,
Hmm.
right? So I thought like, okay, how did this happen? And then they kind of gave us like a little bit of backstory for her. I think that was in the first episode, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, so she was also like a white savior. She was in missionary nonprofit organizations. And
Hmm.
then she sort of awakened and decided that like this stuff that we're doing in Africa is actually bad. And it's like neocolonialism.
Hmm.
And, I thought it was like a good page or organization. I
Hmm.
didn't thought anything bad about it.
Yeah, yeah. When we're first introduced to No White Saviors in the first episode, and their brief appearance, like in the second episode, like it seems like an organization that's trying to like spread awareness about what those missionary organizations are doing. And for me, as a Black American, I feel like we don't see enough of the Africans having the intellectual, or not intellectual, but more like ideological fight against white supremacy. Like we don't see a lot of that. And in fact, in episode 1, I was very disappointed to see all the, Ugandan kids chasing after the white folks saying, Mzungu, Mzungu, and, oh, her face is washed with milk and she is beautiful and well endowed and all that sort of stuff. It was very disappointing. And it brought me back to when we were in Tanzania and Kenya and stuff like that. And people were like chasing you down and, acting very nice to you and all that sort of stuff, right? So, I liked how no white saviors was like putting up that, that mind wall, or spreading that message that we have to be aware of white supremacy and all of those things as well.
Yeah. And it definitely like took me back to, when we were in Africa as well. And if you remember when we did our review, I said something like, it's so easy to have this sort of ego complex when you're there because everybody treats you like you're royalty.
Mm-hmm.
And I just like in this episode while I was watching it, I just imagined myself being in Renee's shoes because
Mm-hmm.
I went to Africa just like as a normal tourist who's very broke.
Mm-hmm.
Didn't have any money, didn't have any sort of education or skills to help anybody, basically. And even then, people asked me for help, like
Mm-hmm.
asking me to teach them English, asking me to take them to Europe and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
And I had to like check myself every single time. For example, a man hit on me because I had to like, weigh why is this really happening? Like, is it because of white supremacist beliefs or is it because this person is really interested? For example.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, you're fine, so people are going to do that.
Yeah, but you also have to think of like all the aspects of it and imagine just like me as a tourist, I've been chased down as the Mzungu
Mm-hmm.
couple of times, a lot of times. And then imagine being like this sort of serving person who actually goes there to give food, to give amenities.
Mm-hmm.
Like imagine the awe of that. Like
Yeah.
I think it's like a complete different level as well.
Right. I mean, on one hand, I can understand the Africans, like ignorant people just in general. Everybody around the world is fed the image of, white superiority and that white people have it better, right? Because we all have TV, we all see the magazines, newspapers, and all that sort of stuff. And if you're living in Uganda and all you see is black oppression and black depression, you're going to see the white man as like, oh, wow, oh, somebody's coming here to finally save me or fix our country or fix our place, right? So there's that thing. So I understand where it comes from, but there has to be that education for people not to fall into that trap. And I wanted to ask you this question. There are some people who would watch this and say, you know, the missionaries can't be racist. They can't be bad because these are white people going to all black Africa feeding black kids. What would you say to, you know, that critique? Like, oh, Renee can't be racist. She adopted a black daughter. She fed African children.
I would say, oh, like colonialism wasn't that bad because they developed Africa.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's sort of like the same mentality. Of course, it's not like the same in terms of like, you know, harm,
Mm-hmm.
obviously. And I'm sure they helped people to a degree, but volunteer work is not just about like feeding people. I think, you know, they should consider different aspects of it. They should consider the history behind it as well. I think like there shouldn't be any, even if it's like missionary groups, I don't think there should be only white people going there. Like it should be a mixture of races going there. Asians, black people, especially black people, and they should like have it in their, you know, groups so that like at least there is this image of like, oh, okay, America is helping us and not just like white
That's a
people helping us.
very good point, actually, because like if you notice, yeah, like all of the people that were going on these Christian missionary groups were like young white kids, right? And in America, we have this religious divide. You know, Martin Luther King said the most segregated place in America is Sunday at 12 o'clock when everybody's at different churches. So like, you know, our churches are still very segregated in America. You have white churches and black churches and, you know, hundreds of different denominations and such. But, the evangelical movement in America is still primarily led by mostly white radical Christians who say that they believe in love and the equality of man and stuff like that. But they'll fly to Uganda to help starving African kids, but can't fly to Mississippi to help poor black American kids who don't have clean water and live in horrible conditions as well. So, you know, it's an interesting thing, our Christian American culture in America.
Yeah, definitely. Like, if you can't bring together different races in your own country under religion, then, like, when you go to Africa, what is your motivation, right?
Yeah.
It is giving, like, white savior. It is giving, you know, white Jesus, this type of thing.
Yeah. So, another thing that I was thinking about in the first episode, the first time I watched it, the leader of the Jinja hospital in Uganda called up Renee and said, hey, can you help these malnourished kids? And a part of me felt like he was partially responsible for the situation that happened to these kids, for what Renee would do later. And then I rewatched it again and I was like, okay, it's not really his fault because all he asked was for her to feed the kids, right? But Renee decided, I'm going to do more than feed. I'm going to put IVs and medicine all up in them. But I'm still sort of conflicted because on one hand, if you know you have all these really malnourished kids, why would you still send them to a clinic that basically just gives kids beans and rice? You get what I'm saying?
I
I don't
think,
know.
like, if I remember correctly, I think what happened was that in the hospital they had like very malnourished kids, yes, but then they gave the, you know, appropriate medical intervention. But after that, like, they still needed to be like, you know, fixed up a little bit more. They still needed like some sort of hospital or clinic environment. So I think that's when they wanted her to take over, and they said like, okay, we did the first step, but maybe you can like, you know, help them have that nutrition that they need.
Right.
And I think that was the purpose. I don't think they sent like children to her for her to have like any medical intervention. So
They didn't.
yeah.
Yeah, I don't think they knew that she was going to do that, but it still seems extremely reckless to me. that the hospital would even open up that possibility. But on one hand, the guy did say, our hospital is only supposed to help 100 kids, but we are really helping like 200 to 300 kids, in our facility. So they are overwhelmed, right? And
Yeah.
so they were
I
using Renee's services to fill the gap. Go ahead.
Yeah, I think like also throughout the docu-series, there was a big emphasis on sort of how normal child death was in Africa.
Mm,
And it happened like all the time.
hmm
And there, like you can see sort of, yeah, they need help.
hmm
So
Yeah,
I think that was sort of like the cry for help. And he also, I think, got influenced because she was white and
right.
she was sort of like religious as well.
hmm
I think that impressed him as well.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't think it was anything meant to be more than just giving food.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, it is Renee's decision to stop the feeding program, which actually is a good thing. Like this documentary, none of these things would have happened had she just continued to give the kids beans and rice, right? So, I could blame the medical doctor, but he just basically said, please just help us feed these kids, help them gain weight. And so all she had to do was keep on buying beans and rice, but she had to take it to another level. Insane. Insane. I wanted to ask you this before we get into the second episode. Can we talk about this documentary without talking about white feminism? Because feminism is not explicitly brought up in this documentary. But I feel like it's like the question, like, can you have a black story without it being a black story? Like, can you have black main characters in it without it being what is supposed to be a black story? You get what I'm saying?
Are you saying like this is a white story?
I'm saying that does white feminism play any part in sort of understanding Renee's decisions or understanding the context of how this story happened? Like, what do you think?
At first, I thought it didn't really have anything to do with like sexism or feminism. Because we talked about it like after the movie as well, and I thought, okay, like I think it's more about like whiteness and race rather than it's about feminism. But like, yeah, looking back at it, I do think, okay, maybe she did feel like she couldn't be this successful in her environment in America, and then she sort of became like at what 20, 21 years old, became an owner of a nonprofit organization.
hmm
So yeah, I do think there's that dynamic there. What do you think?
Yeah, I like you said. I think in a lot of religious organizations all across the world, women are powerless. Right? Women can't become imams. They can't become priests. Women can't be the pope. A woman can't be a bishop. You get what I'm saying? So it's very interesting to see how women still are a part of organizations where they're blocked out of power, but still exercise power in different ways. And so going to Africa, being a white woman from America, you're going to exercise your white privilege over the people there, right? Even over a man, right? Something you couldn't do in America. And then, being a religious figure, being white in and of itself, you're associated with Jesus Christ. You're associated with God. So the people are, looking up to you. So I think there is some degree of like, women trying to gain power and autonomy for themselves by taking themselves out of the environment that they come from. So,
Yeah, and there was like this also like this dynamic that you can always see between Renee and all the like Ugandan mothers, right?
hmm
Because it's always like 99%, I guess it was the mothers who were bringing the children in.
hmm
And it was, I don't know, it was sort of like, there's this difference in class, in like the way Renee sees herself, even though like, yes, she's talking to them, she's doing whatever, and she's communicating with them. Yes,
hmm
she's not like explicitly doing anything to undermine them. But I think the background is like that,
Right.
because then when she gets praised, oh, white angel, white lady, like,
Uh-huh.
she's like, she's taking all of that and then seeing herself as like the god.
Yeah. I think there also is some degree of like this white feminism really doesn't understand, the intersection of like race, power, and class because if Renee actually cared about these women and their children, right, she wouldn't have been at the end sort of like fighting to take accountability for what she did, which is what we'll talk about like in episode 3. Right. So
Yeah.
I think a lot of the times white feminism is only focused on uplifting white women rather than all women, because the
Yeah.
way Renee acted at the end shows that she really doesn't care about the black mothers who lost their children under her care. You get what I'm saying?
Definitely. And we don't ever see once of Renee sort of encouraging these women
Mm-hmm.
or trying to teach them anything, really, like trying to teach them to have sex, like protected sex.
Right. Well, that's a part of like the American Christian culture as well. Like they're against contraceptives, they're against abortion, they're against premarital sex. But I think that also leads to another question too. Sorry I'm taking so long, but this is interesting. I'm enjoying this conversation with you, and I have to ask you this because I asked you this last night. But some people might watch this and say, you know, Renee is just trying to help a Ugandan culture that is backwards. They have a baby mama culture. They have a single mother culture. They have a culture of men who are impregnating women and then running away from their responsibilities. And this is like people saying, you know, that the Ugandans basically are backwards and white people are just trying to clean up the mess that these blacks are doing. What do you think about that?
I think that if a country or if a society has enough sources and resources to back up the problems this might cause, it won't be a problem. It won't be defined as a problem, because why isn't this like a problem in, let's say, France? You know, France is a big party like country. Everyone does drugs. Everyone, like, you know, their people probably have sex a lot there and things like that, but they have abortion, they have birth control, they have sex education, they have different centers for these things, so these things can be prevented. And Uganda doesn't have those things because they don't have enough resources.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think, and I told you this like yesterday, like HIV is not a culture. Nobody wants to get like HIV, or, you know, having the father of your child leaving you is not a culture.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody wants that. Nobody would uplift that as culture.
Well,
So I
some
think this
people
is
would
like
say,
lacking in other things.
well, some people would say, oh, in America, black Americans have a baby mama, baby daddy culture, and we sort of uplift that. And that's why we're falling apart.
I mean, in America, if you're a baby mama, for example, you can get a lot of money. And I don't know, like get child support and things like that. And yeah, uplifting that is a problem, maybe, but depends on like how you want to live your life. If you're okay with having a child without a husband, like that's fine.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's not going to hurt anybody unless it's not hurting you.
Mm-hmm.
And in America, you have laws and resources to take care of that. You have family planning and, you know, child support and things like that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I think that there's the issue of like lacking in legal parts and also like in the resources part in Uganda, because then we can say the same thing about Turkey. We can say, okay, raping women is a culture in Turkey, but like it's not actually, because it's the lack of education that enables this.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I see what you're saying. My opinion is like, you know, everything you said about the lack of resources is true, but there's also, I would say, not a culture of baby mamas and baby daddies, but there is a culture that is against any sort of protectiveness during sex. Like there's a Vice documentary that I sent you last night where the Christian missionaries, the same people who are like going to Jinja to feed the kids, they're also going and telling the Ugandans, you know, abortion is wrong, birth control is wrong, just wait to have sex until marriage and all that sort of stuff. And like all the bad advice that we were given in Louisiana, Texas, Mississippi, where I ended up seeing girls in high school with pregnant bellies at 16 and stuff like that. All that bad advice they gave us, they're now giving to the Ugandans as well. And a part of me feels like it might even be a sick sort of way of manufacturing the next group of children that they just end up having to take care of for their NGOs to make, hundreds of thousands of dollars or millions. Do you get what I'm saying?
Yeah, that short documentary was so sick because I just cannot get this out of my head ever since I watched this.
Mm-hmm.
They tell these like 15-year-old, 16, 17-year-old pregnant Ugandan girls that when they get abortion, the doctor would get the baby out of them and they would have to snap their heads themselves.
Wow.
Like, what type of lie are you like, creating? And then
Mm-hmm.
you're scaring these children, telling them that they're gonna go to hell, showing them like this blended baby in the
Mm-hmm.
blender.
Mm-hmm.
And then they talk to the American head of this like organization, and he basically says, we're just giving the correct information.
Right.
I know
Right.
it's harsh, but they have to know the truth. Like, this is not the truth.
Yeah, yeah. So there's a lot of factors, I think, as to why, the single motherhood in Uganda is high, and why so many kids are, in these predicaments where these poor mothers are, forced to go to clinics like Renee's to just get beans and rice for their kids. There's a lot of reasons why it's poverty. It's the sexism in Uganda where women don't get good jobs or good careers and they're left to be uneducated and subservient to a man. But it's also the Christian missionary culture that is coming from the West that's telling Ugandans, yeah, don't have abortions, don't wear condoms, multiply, be fruitful and multiply, and don't have sex until you're married, which nobody follows that last advice. So it's a plethora of things on top of things.
Yeah, like according to the, last thought, then missionary American organizations are creating this culture because they're
Yeah.
basically not allowing women to have abortion rights or birth control rights.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, it's crazy. It's crazy. So yeah, that's a long talk about episode one, but I felt like there were so many issues in episode one as soon as you start this series. But going into episode two, basically, the girl who came from America who was a nurse, her name is Jamie. She ends up quitting serving his children after working there for a few months because she can no longer tolerate seeing Renee basically act like she's a doctor to these malnourished kids. So she ends up writing an email to the board of directors for serving his children. And the email goes to, guess who? Renee's mom, who is the director of serving his children. And, Jamie thought, well, because Renee's mom is the board director, she has a legal responsibility to share the information with the rest of the members. But if I remember right, Renee's mom didn't do that. Do you remember?
She actually did, but
Mm-hmm.
the rest of the board is her friends and their family members.
Oh, God.
So it's like no win here.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. All right. So basically, Jamie quits and she continues to do missionary work in Uganda with her husband. And, she's separate on the side. And so Renee is continuing to expand her operation in her house in Jinja, Uganda. She ends up hiring some nurses and hiring a doctor and hiring other Ugandan professionals who know what they're doing. But when the kids are very, very sick, Renee sort of like takes over control and doesn't listen to the nurses. So the nurses are saying like, we need to do this, we need to do that. And Renee's like, no, I know better. Or she'll call up an American doctor and the American doctor will say, no, you need to do this. And so Renee is like not paying attention to any of the advice she's given. And then there's one day when this girl named Patricia, right? Patricia is this little baby that she has in her facility. She gets really, really sick. And, she's about to do a blood transfusion on her, right? So Renee is trying to do a whole entire blood transfusion on this girl with no other, nurses around. None of the other Ugandan nurses are actually there. And she ends up taking this baby to Kampala, which is the capital of Uganda, to the biggest hospital. And she transfers back and forth to that hospital every single day. And eventually Patricia lives, but Patricia has horrible scars on her face because she had a skin-eating disease that was eating her cheeks and stuff like that. So meanwhile, Constance, the nurse that AKDI brought up earlier in the first episode, is still in contact with American Jamie, who is still in Uganda. So sometimes Constance will talk to Jamie about what's happening at Serving His Children. And, eventually Constance tells Jamie that, Renee is basically doing whatever she wants. She's not listening to the professionals. She's doing treatment how she sees fit. And so then Jamie is like, okay, this is getting insane. And she starts talking to other missionaries, other women, white women missionaries, and the Karen on Karen violence begins. There's another white woman there who's been in Uganda for 11 years. She's well connected in the community. She emails the American embassy, stop Renee, stop Renee. The U.S. embassy says what happens in Uganda stays in Uganda. The white woman then calls, the police. The police tell her to drop it. Eventually she contacts the Department of Health, and the Department of Health is like, we're going to find out about this. They pull up to Serving His Children and they shut Renee down. But then Renee ends up opening a facility with the government to continue to feed children. And I'm like, how did this happen? How did it get to this point? So, No White Saviors, the Instagram group, continues to get on Renee's case, and they're posting about what Renee is doing, about, feeding the kids and some of the kids dying in her care and her doing medical treatment. And they're taking the information from her blog, which she types online to raise money for her organization. And they basically say this woman is openly admitting to operating like a nurse or a doctor without a medical license at all. And so then Renee eventually gets, death threats, calls on her phone. And then her father calls her one day and says, get the hell out of Uganda. And then she flees the country with her adopted baby, Selah, and she never returns to Uganda. And this happens in about 2015, 2016, something like that, if I remember right. But yeah, what did you think about episode 2?
Okay, that was definitely a roller coaster. Yeah, like seeing Renee sort of advancing what she's doing and starting to like do medical procedures that are like way above her head. That was like, I was just thinking like, how could you? Because how do you have that sort of, I don't want to say courage. It's like a blind courage. I don't know, like, how can you do like a blood transfusion without studying it? Like, that's sort of impossible. And then also like just, it was nice to hear Jamie, or whatever her name is, Jamie, the former employee of White Saviors.
Yeah, her name
No,
is Jamie.
his saviors.
Serving His Children.
Serving His Children. When she was explaining like the medical stuff that was correct, and how like she was not doing that, it just very much solidified how important actually to be trained, because she was asking Renee like, did you take her vitals? And Renee is like, I didn't know, like I didn't take her vitals because I was such a hurry. And like just weird and unacceptable excuses like this while she's doing whatever she wants. And also like another thing that added up to like me seeing Renee as sort of like the bad person in this scenario was that after she employed all these like Ugandan nurses and doctors, she was still the one hands-on doing everything. She was telling the nurses like, don't do it like this, do it like that. And like these people are trained, medically trained, and you are not. So how are you like not learning from them, and instead you're acting like you know everything just because you own the organization?
Yeah.
Like, it felt like at that point, like her goal was not to help children specifically, but it was sort of like to become even bigger in her community in Uganda. Just to like, save everyone and do everything herself, and then come out and say, I saved everyone because Jesus told me how to do it.
Yeah. I think that's the craziest part. Like, let's really take a step back. Like, this woman went to this foreign country, bought a house, and in one of the back rooms created an ICU, an intensive care unit for malnourished children. And all she had really was 18 years of homeschool and a 2-week course on medical treatment from her church. What? What? Are we like, think about how crazy that is. Like, she took like a course on how to inject like IVs and take blood pressure. and now had an intensive care unit for malnourished children.
Yeah.
That's insane. That's
Like,
literally insane.
probably her biology knowledge is worse than mine.
Absolutely.
Like, I don't
Absolutely.
know. Like, I don't know how, like, homeschooling it really is that much, because it's not popular in Turkey at all. I don't even know if it's allowed.
Hmm.
But I'm thinking it's not enough to open a freaking, like, this unit
Yeah.
in your house.
One of the funniest scenes is when Renee is like pointing at something on a child's belly, and she's like, "What is this? Abitus, crephitis?" And the nurse is like, "It's ascites," and she's like, "Oh, I'm so sorry, I don't know anything." That was crazy. And then the camera turns to Renee, and because she's the spokesman for this organization, she's standing in front of this malnourished African child, and she mispronounces it again. She doesn't even remember what the nurse just told her. It's ascites. But she's like, "Yeah, this baby here has chromitis on his stomach." And I was like, what? How stupid can you be? Like, how mediocre can you be? And I think, though, it's good to talk about at this point, like, how the doctors and nurses felt, because the interviewer asked the nurses, "Why didn't you say anything to Renee? Why didn't you speak up?" And they were like, "We felt powerless. She's our boss. We need jobs." And, telling our boss that, what she's doing is wrong is not going to, make us have work for long. What did you think about that?
Yeah, I think there was, like, definitely added pressure for the workers, because, like, she's white, she's like Jesus, right? She's helping children in general, and she's trying to help, like, Ugandans. Plus, she pays them. So it's like, it's just a really hard situation. And most of the people won't say anything to their bosses.
Hmm. Yeah.
So I can understand their mindset. They're a bit of like, there's like a Stockholm syndrome a little bit.
Yeah, yeah. I think it's a little bit of cowardice because, as a medical doctor, you take the Hippocratic oath, that you're going to do whatever to save the life of your patient, no matter what, when, or where, right? And for the real Ugandan doctor who was hired to be there to see this happening and see a woman who has no medical training, it's almost an insult to your profession and almost an offense to humankind, because you're allowing this woman to try to treat children and you're giving her advice and she's not following it. Think about if that happened in America, if that happened in the UK, if that happened in Canada, that person would be arrested and be out of here. But because, she's white, she's your boss, you're going to say, okay, no, 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 I was powerless. I felt a little bit offended.
Yeah, I mean, I think if they tried to like correct her or even like got in an argument with her, I think they would be fired.
Hmm.
But then I think this was like the perfect moment for all of them to come together and sue her.
Mm.
And then when it sort of happened later, it was a bit like too late, too little sort
Mm.
of thing. But yeah, I think like there should have been a formal complaint by them, because that's what like the other American girl did, right?
Right. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, but again, also you have to consider the context of it. These are not very rich Ugandans who probably maybe get paid more from Rene than a regular hospital
Hmm.
or a
Hmm.
regular like village clinic.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's also the issue there, is that everybody's trying to survive and they're still saving lives
A little bit
to a
of
degree,
yeah, to a
right?
degree. Like, I think the issue is that, Renee probably still was doing some good work. And I feel bad even saying this because I feel like she should be in jail for what she was doing, because in any other country, you would be in jail. In America, a few years ago, we had this kid go viral. His name was Dr. Strangelove or something like that, right? I don't know. Dr. Love, Malachi Love, something like that. He was this 18-year-old black kid who would go to different hospitals and pretend to be a doctor. And he would do this for months. Like, he would be working at a hospital for months and people would just think he's a doctor. And he ended up going to jail for it because he kept on doing it. He would get arrested for it. The judge would say, "Oh, that's so cute. You want to be a doctor. Okay. Just probation." And then he would do it again because he has scamming in his heart. And I think he's in jail right now. But like Renee can do this in an entire other country, have kids die on her watch, and then just flee and never face consequences for it. You get what I'm
Yeah.
saying?
Yeah,
So,
and that's the thing. Like, she only had a medical like license for 1 year, and
hmm
then she did not renew it, and that was also like the year that she founded the organization.
hmm
So when like during that year, she wasn't even doing that big of things.
hmm
Maybe she was just putting IVs, right? But
hmm
then later she started doing like blood transfusions, putting oxygen tanks. And this is the thing, like, yeah, children die at the hospital too. In
hmm
fact, Renee's clinic's death rate was lower than the hospital.
hmm
But
But
you have to think, yeah, go ahead.
yeah. But I think you were about to say this. At
Yeah.
those hospitals in Uganda, those kids are coming with HIV and tuberculosis and other diseases as well.
That, but also, like, you have to consider a hospital is professional. They know what they're doing, and the kids who died probably died because that was just like the last thing.
Right.
And there was no way for them to be healed.
Right.
But with Renee's clinic, there is a possibility that some of these kids died and they didn't have to.
Well,
And
the
they
thing
died because of wrong medication.
Well, the thing about Renee's way of treating the kids, because she didn't know what she was doing, she was hurting them even more by putting the IVs and all that stuff in them in the first place. Because Jamie, the actual nurse, came there and said, refeeding syndrome or something like that is when you put too much pressure on a kid's heart by injecting them with all these fluids and medicines. And it would have just been much better just to feed them slowly through like a sippy cup and see them slowly gain weight. But Renee was like, nah, let's make them big, fat, and juicy right now. Pump them up, full of IVs and stuff like that. There was a scene when she was like trying to like pump air out of a kid's stomach, something like that, with like a foot pedal. I don't know if you remember that. Like she was doing way too much when all she really had to do was just keep feeding the kids. So I think her death rate is actually much higher than it would have been because she was doing all of those medical procedures.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. Like, that's the problem, because when you go to the hospital, like 90% of the time, you know you're getting the right treatment
Mm-hmm.
because there are professionals. But with her, there's like a very high possibility that most of the kids probably died because they were given the wrong sort of medical treatment.
Mm-hmm.
Like, what do you know about blood transfusion?
Mm-hmm.
Like,
Yeah.
she was watching from YouTube and then
Yeah.
like Googling it
Mm-hmm.
and trying to do it. Like, the stuff they say for adults, she was applying to kids and things like that. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. I think we just can't forget the refeeding syndrome stuff because I feel like, once again, this documentary puts a lot of information out there, but because Renee is involved in the story, it makes you feel more sympathetic to her because she tells her side. But then she also blatantly lies as well because at the story of the blood transfusion, Constance says, I wasn't there at work that day when Renee did the transfusion. I don't know anything about that. And then they talk to Renee and say, tell us what happened that day she did the transfusion. And she was like, I was there, Constance was there, and I did it with the nurse supervising me. And then the director is like, we spoke to Constance, and she said she wasn't there. And then Renee's like, oh, wow. Oh, well, I remember it that way. I remember one of the nurses were there. I mean, they all sort of look alike, right? Like, come on.
Yeah, that was so like effed up.
Uh-huh.
And like, when you do something like that, you automatically take the responsibility for that child's life.
Mm-hmm.
If a child like that comes and you don't have any nurses around, then
Mm-hmm.
you have the option to say, like, I'm sorry, I'm not qualified and I might hurt your kid even more. So I don't
Mm-hmm.
want to take this responsibility. Let's take her to the hospital. Let's call
Yeah.
the nurse. Like, let's
Mm-hmm.
wait a little bit more. You can do stuff like that easily.
Yeah.
And especially in her like position, because she's a powerful, position.
Mm-hmm.
But instead, she just said, I have Jesus with me.
Yeah.
And he's telling me like where to cut, where to puncture, what to put in. So I'm just going to do it. Like, that
Yeah.
was just so stupid.
What did you think about all the money that she was getting? Because by writing her blog and documenting her experiences and taking all these cute pictures of her cuddling with these African kids, she was able to raise like six figures every single year, and the money kept on getting higher and higher. What did you think about all of that?
I know like the money was mostly going to her, like helping the kids. But at the same time, I think there's a part of exploitation in that, because it's sort of not just only with like, African kids or black kids. And I think that's true for, any impoverished kid, is like using their images like that. I think it's just very unethical.
Mm-hmm.
Like, yeah, these things are happening, and yes, like you can use certain pictures, but like every day, like posting those type of pictures and using that emotional manipulation for
Mm-hmm.
people to help, like those people who are helping are not helping for the right reasons as well. Just like
Mm-hmm.
Renee, they're thinking, oh, poor Africans, like poor black people, let me give them some money and feel better about myself. I'm their white savior. Like
Mm-hmm.
literally the people I'm thinking who donated all that money,
Mm-hmm.
90% of them thought like that. And that's
Mm-hmm.
just continuing and adding on to a cycle.
Yeah, yeah. I'm gonna disagree with you just a little bit. I don't think it's wrong, in essence, to donate to charity, even if it's a Christian missionary, right? If you believe that they're doing good work, right? I just think, like you said, they are continuing to propagate that image of the poor African that needs help, that needs assistance, especially from the white man, right? Like in the beginning when No White Saviors was creating their Instagram posts, and there's an image of a white man kneeling down with like a bowl of food, and an African child is like running towards him like an animal, like a dog or something like that. Like, yeah, by Renee doing those pictures and creating that image, they are continuing to perpetuate that view of Africa and black people in Africa.
Yeah, no, I don't think there's anything wrong with donating money to charities. I'm just saying that like the way they asked for donations was unethical for me.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Because the moral of the story should be, look, you are sitting at home and you're eating all this food, you're eating your bacon, you're eating your pancake, and there are kids who are starving here because of a certain system.
Yeah.
And let's like, eat one less pancake and then send that to like us.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a way that we can balance like,
Mm-hmm.
ways of living. But
Yeah. Yeah.
instead it's more like, oh, like poor black people dying and stuff like that, or poor African children dying because their mothers get knocked up.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I
And
think
yeah.
I think about the whole money thing, right? I think it's not a coincidence that there's so many, NGOs in Africa, because even though it's a non-profit organization, people are still making money from that, right? Like, if you're the leader of one of those organizations, you can create your own salary for however much you want or something like that, right? And you can just, then use the rest of the money for your organization. Like, people are not just doing this out of the kindness of their own heart. With all that money involved, there's going to be people that are getting rich from it.
Yeah, if I remember correctly, in one of the documents, it was said that 60% of the money that was raised was going to the charity.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, there's that 40% where probably they get paid.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
like that's reasonable. Like, okay, I'm not saying anything to that. Like, of course you're working for this, right? And you need things to live.
Mm-hmm.
So like there's nothing wrong with that.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, it's just like, and also to think about the stuff that they raised for was going for medical equipment, like
Mm-hmm.
oxygen tanks and blood and stuff like
Mm-hmm.
that. And then those materials were used unprofessionally. So basically
Right.
going to waste and killing children.
Right, right, right. There was also a part in episode 2 when they went to the actual hospital in Kampala, right? And the nurse is saying like a mortality rate of 10 to 15% is actually understandable, right? Because there are a lot of kids that come in extremely malnourished, and they also have these other diseases as well. But the nurse also said there that it's forbidden in Uganda for, medical clinics to treat extremely malnourished children. And, yeah, what did you think about that part, if you remember?
I don't remember that part. And I don't know why that would happen. Maybe it's because the kids are so fragile that whatever they do, they won't be saved. So they're literally maybe not taking the responsibility of it. I'm not sure why it's like that. Or maybe it's because, like, if there's no chance or very low chance of saving them, they're like, okay, we have to take care of the children that we can actually save. And then, yeah, maybe take care of that other child who's in a very bad condition later. But I don't think that's like a good thing.
Right. Well, that part is in there. The medical doctor said, it's forbidden in our country for hospitals to do that. And then the Jinja regional director, the guy, he said, like, when serving his children actually got shut down, I was not surprised, because what they were doing there was crazy. And, what did you think about No White Saviors sort of like, fostering a hostile environment towards Renee and her getting like death threats and their media campaign against her, and Kelsey, the white girl from, No White Saviors, sort of like leading the charge with making all the memes and posts about Renee?
Yeah, it was a bit funny, but again, I'm also connecting the things I saw in the last episode as well. But it was sort of like this white woman who didn't like Renee, right? Jamie or Jackie, whatever. And
Jamie was the nurse that used to work for Renee, and Kelsey was the girl from No White Saviors.
Okay, so Jamie was the enemy of Renee because she just did not want to like let anything go by that Renee is doing because she's unprofessional. And I think in reality she was just mad because she actually had the medical training and she had Jesus with her too, but everybody loved Renee more. So I think she was jealous. I think she wanted to be the savior and she wanted to be like Renee, but Renee didn't allow that because Renee's ego was also very big as well when it came to like the savior stuff. And if you remember, she had like this picture, almost Jesus-like, right, in a room full of all the children she saved, and there's like light coming from the background, and she opens her arms like she's almost like Jesus. Shit like that. Like Renee was doing stuff like that. I'm sure she saw herself as like one of the apostles or something. And I think Jamie was jealous, first of all. And then I think that's why she wanted to take her down a little bit as well. And yeah, maybe there's also like, her dedication to work as well. That was a part of it as well. I don't think she had bad intentions. And like her contacting Kelsey, it was just like, it was a bit out of context because there was no Ugandans involved in that conversation. But of course there was a Ugandan lady in the No White Saviors team. So, yeah.
Yeah, I didn't get the impression that Jamie was jealous. I feel like she was a bit more concerned and worried. I just feel like, Kelsey was very turned up on social justice warrior activism and the online presentation of everything, right? And to some degree, Kelsey is right to be leading this charge against Renee because she is so, she's doing horrible things, practicing medicine without a license and all of that sort of stuff. But at the same time, I was like, Kelsey, on one hand, like, you have to let the Ugandans sort of do this. You're acting sort of like a white savior to some degree by how hard you're going on Renee, feeling like you know better and you need to, maybe dial it back a bit. And yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to add, like, of course, what Renee was doing wasn't professional. And there were faults in it, but I also felt like Kelsey or No White Saviors was sort of allowing her to get bullied online and getting like death threats. And like, yes, her mistakes should be like, she should be held accountable. And yes, she should be told like, this is what you're doing is wrong, and she should understand that. but like leading other people to tell her she should kill herself or they should kill her child in front of her and she should watch it and then kill her. Like, that's not going to help anyone.
Yeah.
That's not going to change her mind. That's going to make her think that No White Saviors is like a hate organization.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And there was also a degree of like no white saviors using the controversy to grow their accounts and make their Instagram bigger and their profile bigger, right? And there was a degree of like, we're going to use this to make ourselves famous. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and they were like just, I don't know, they were villainizing her. But I think in reality, what they should have done is that, like, okay, we're using Renee as an example and we want to get justice, but, like, this is not something that only Renee does. And, like, also let's not bully her as well. Like, please, people, like, don't send her death threats because it's not going to help our case, like, legally, too.
Right. Well, speaking of that, let's go into episode 3. So in the third episode, Renee has fled Uganda. She got ran out of the country. She's living back in rural Virginia with her adopted daughter, Selah, and also this other kid as well. I don't know where this other kid came from. But she basically has 2 adopted kids now. And meanwhile, in Uganda, they still are trying to run Serving His Children at the beginning of the episode. So they have a Ugandan man there who is trying to continue their work. And meanwhile, No White Saviors is on their case. They're like, trying to gather evidence about everything that, Renee did, from looking at her blog post and trying to interview other people that were there and stuff like that. But they end up raising money to hire a lawyer, a female civil rights, human rights lawyer in Uganda, who takes the case up against Serving His Children to, try to get some justice, right? And so, while No White Saviors is continuing to post, this Ugandan lawyer is going to interview the different women that were, under Serving His Children. And so she finds, 3 ladies. The first lady, had her son die there. She's now, working like in her village, like serving food to people and cooking it and stuff like that. There was a second woman there who had her son die as well that they find. I believe it was the Muslim woman. But then they also go and find the mother of Patricia. And the mother of Patricia, the one that, Renee wrote about on her blog, and the pictures of her scars are everywhere online. She doesn't want to be involved in the case because she says, no, Renee is a good white lady. She helped save Patricia. And Patricia is still alive, but she has visible scars that are very profound on her face. And so they're taking it to court civilly. So it's a civil lawsuit against Serving His Children. Renee, doesn't want to, admit guilt. She's fighting it with her lawyer in the United States. And one of her defenses is that the son who died in her care, she wasn't in Uganda when it happened. The other one, did die, but it was, under the care of other nurses and physicians and stuff like that. And because, Patricia's mother didn't want to be involved, there's no case there at all either. So the case is looking very shaky, but Renee eventually, folds and says, I want to at least feel like, I'm vindicated in the court of law. I want a judge to tell me that I did nothing wrong. So I was ready to settle. And she ends up settling with the families, 2 of the women, for about $10,000. So they each get about 10,000 US dollars each. And, No White Saviors at the same time is still like ramping up their social media attacks on Renee and stuff like that. They're talking crazy, and the Ugandan lawyer is like, you guys are pushing this thing to the max. Like, I don't understand what you guys are doing. Let's handle this in the court of law, not in the court of public opinion. And basically, No White Saviors ends up opening a cafe, a business. But then Kelsey and the black Ugandan woman who are running it fall out because Kelsey was accused of stealing money from the organization, which was hilarious how they were fighting at the cafe and stuff like that. No White Saviors then becomes a fully Ugandan black-owned organization, and the film sort of ends with, Renee just saying, I feel like I did nothing wrong, and that's it. So I don't know. What do you think about episode 3?
Yeah, in episode 3, I got introduced to my favorite person in this whole docuseries, which was the attorney.
Mm-hmm.
I thought she was like the perfect person, and I felt so sad that they didn't know her value, because this
Mm-hmm.
person, obviously being Ugandan, she was so like in tune with her society. Yes,
Mm-hmm.
like she knew her law, she knew all the information and the knowledge, but she was so honest with her work. She was so in tune with the people and the community. She didn't want to force anyone to do anything that they didn't want to. And she still believed that they could win the case to a degree, at least get some money for them. And then she did after that. But yeah, for me, she was like the best person that I saw in this whole documentary. Well, like the most honest, the most ethical person.
Mm-hmm.
And, I don't blame the mother of Patricia, because, I think I would do the same thing. Because, yeah, you have the possibility of your child dying or having a scar on her face. And Renee saved her to a degree. And, she doesn't know, like, other medical things. So
The
I
thing
would be
about
happy that my child is alive as well.
the thing about Patricia's case, though, the only reason she survived is because Renee took her to a hospital multiple times, like real. But if Patricia ended up staying there and Renee did all sorts of weird IV experiments on her, like Patricia would have died too. So I get why the mother is happy her daughter is alive, but at the same time, that was sort of like lucky because Renee just felt lazy that day, I guess. I don't know. Go ahead.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, maybe it was in reality, but like, yeah, she has like she's a woman of belief, She believes in God and whatnot, and I think she saw it as a miracle.
Hmm.
So, and that's why, like, this stuff is dangerous. This missionary white savior work is dangerous, but I cannot blame her.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
if I was in her shoes, I would probably do the same thing. I wouldn't want to sue Renee.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, and then when it comes to like all the social media stuff, like, for example, Patricia's mother didn't want to be involved in the case, but they went ahead and still used her picture to like campaign for their idea, for their case,
Hmm.
which is like totally out of line, totally disrespectful. And I think that's when the attorney and Kelsey and No White Savior sort of like, separated as
Hmm.
well, because she didn't consent to this. So who are you as a white person who's advocating no white saviors,
Hmm.
disregard this woman's feelings and needs and wants, and then put her in the spot just like she's an object?
Hmm.
And yeah, like there, it's obvious that Kelsey was practicing her white supremacy, her privilege. And I don't know how. And there was also this funny scene where the black people in No White Saviors team were talking to Kelsey,
Hmm.
and then she hung up and they said like, okay, but see you later, colonizer, or something like that. So they were also feeling like she was just going overboard with it.
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, that's why it's sort of, because of Kelsey, like I thought, I don't know what is the answer to the question. Like, I don't know if there's one side wrong or right because of Kelsey, because she just took it so far and sort of became what she was criticizing.
Let me just take a step back. Do you think Renee should be in jail?
Oh, hard question.
Oh, come on.
Yes. I want to say yes.
Okay. Why do you feel like you're on the fence about it? It feels iffy.
It feels iffy because I think that, yeah, like she didn't go there with the right intentions. And she was also probably brainwashed by her family and her church all her life as well. So, yeah, she's an adult and she should have her own opinions. But I think what she needs more than jail is education. So maybe like a year in Ugandan jail is enough.
Okay. All right. And that's what I feel like is the problem with this film to some degree. Because we still it doesn't really give you the mind to keep in context her crime. Under any other circumstance, if I went to Turkey and opened up a clinic and was doing medical, procedures on children, would I go to jail in Turkey if I was caught?
True, you would.
And if you went to America and opened up a clinic and was doing whatever to kids, you would go to jail in America, right?
Yeah, yeah.
But we go to Africa and do the same thing to black African kids, and it's like, oh, maybe, I don't know, her intentions, she tried. Some kids lived, some kids died. I mean, come on now. There's like this double standard when it comes to black life. Like, that black life has less value. So if black African kids are dying, they're gonna die anyway, right? Like, hell, Uganda, every day in the hospital, 2 kids die. So yeah, they die under Renee's care. Who cares? You get what I'm saying? It's
Okay.
problematic to me.
It is. You got me there.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. I didn't think of it like that. And yeah, that is a problem in the conclusion of the movie, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah. And another thing is, like, at the end, her organization was shut down. Serving His Children was officially shut down. She had to pay about $20,000 to 2 mothers, right? To some degree, the lawyer said, justice is different to everybody. And on one hand, I'm glad her organization got shut down, but it doesn't really feel like full justice. Yes, $10,000 is a lot of money, especially in Uganda, right? That's probably 3 years worth of salary for, those people, maybe even more. But, what's the cost of a life, I feel like it was still a small amount of money compared to what those mothers went through.
Yeah, yeah. And, it's also a bit interesting of, the Christian community, and it kind of shows, at least the community of Renee, right? And this, missionary societies in United States. It shows, the two-facedness of the situation, because they're supposed to be pro-life. They're supposed to be anti-abortion, doing all the stuff, but they're okay with, children dying under one of their own.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, I feel like there should have been backlash from their community as well. But it was sort of just backlash from, I guess, liberals or leftists.
Yeah, that's the thing. Like, the film shows the hypocrisy of the American evangelical Christian right. Because the lawyer for Renee, he's like this, RV driving, Bible thumping, praying in the courtroom type of guy, right? And he's like, my client did nothing wrong. 109 babies died under her care, but she's still innocent. Like, take some responsibility. Like, Jesus Christ himself would be mournful, remorseful, give those children and those mothers everything he had to try to give up, to get some accountability and take responsibility for that. You get what I'm saying? Like, why are these people, when the shit hits the fan, they hide behind the law, which is really their God. It's not the Bible. It's not Jesus. It's, white American law protects you from any sort of responsibility for taking the lives of these black children.
Yeah, true. I mean, I'm sure Jesus also taught him the law as well. But yeah, I mean, it was a crazy story, and I'm sure there's more like this and even worse.
Yeah.
Sadly, and they're not exposed because of, also it's part Uganda's fault, and it's part white supremacy's fault. Mm-hmm. What do you think? Whose fault is this?
I think there are structural problems in Uganda when it comes to their medical, taking all the white people out of Uganda would still have a bad medical system, right? Their hospitals are overrun. They don't seem like they're fully funded, and they're not given the support, and they need more staff in them. So that is a structural problem in the country in and of itself. Add on top of that, you have all of these NGOs who are coming there, basically running a parallel economy to the medical industry there, where they're raking in millions of dollars every year from charities and donations, and all they have to do is put up a sign that says, "We feed hungry black children," right? And you'll get a system that sort of continues to churn out the same results, where you get children who are dying, mothers who are not getting the proper medical treatment for their kids and stuff like that. And then add on top of that another layer, the religious missionary community who's spreading this American puritanical ideology that, sex is bad, okay, condoms bad, okay, abortion's bad, okay, and you're just gonna have a clusterfuck of fuckery all around, right? So
Yeah.
it's Uganda's fault to some degree, it's America's fault to our degree, and it's our fault to some degree as a global community that we allow, this to continue to happen,
Yeah. I think Uganda should create like just strict laws like for organizations like this.
Mm-hmm.
Because what if all that money that all of these organizations make is donated to the hospitals and the medical centers?
Mm-hmm.
I feel like it would help much more than what they're individually doing.
Yeah. Yeah, just donate to the Ginger Hospital. Donate
Yeah.
to the Kampala Hospital.
Yeah, and
Like,
that's the problem. Like they want to be the forefront, they want to be the face of the help.
but that's the thing about white supremacy. White supremacy is also about financial control and domination. So white people aren't just going to trust to give their money to black hands, right? They're going to be like, let's give it to a white person who will properly administer the money the way he or she sees fit. Because we can't trust the Africans with money. White supremacy is a lot about keeping black folks economically dispossessed. The world is, built on the oppression of the African. Africa has to be poor so America, the West, can be rich. Because how else are we going to get the cocoa, the diamonds, the platinum, the gold? You get what I'm saying?
Yeah, that was definitely very true what you said.
Sorry, I'm ranting right here.
No, no, it's okay.
But yeah, my only complaints about this film, once again, you walk away from it maybe feeling like Renee was not that bad of a person. I really wish also in this film they did more of the history of colonialism and missionary work in Africa, because that history is actually very, very deep, about what the missionaries brought to Africa and how they were a part of the system of control and domination. So I just wish that was there as well. And maybe they could have had, more spots in there to include that. But
Yeah.
overall, it was good. It was a good documentary. Sad story to watch. But yeah, what do you think?
Yeah, I think it was a good documentary as well, and I will agree to your critique. But other than that, like it's sort of like left to the viewer what to think at the end, and it could be taken to many directions. But I do think like everyone can agree that Renee did something wrong if you're in the right mindset. Like if you're a normal person, like you can agree that a person who doesn't have a medical certificate shouldn't do shit like that.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely. If you are not a doctor, stay out the ICU.
Yeah, no DIY ICU.
No DIY ICU. That was a funny quote from one of the doctors. That was hilarious. What you call it? DIY? That's great. One more comment I have to say about no white saviors and like social justice online activism. Like it can be taken to an extreme. The beautiful thing about social media, it gives us all a voice to express ourselves and also highlight issues around the world. But taken to its extreme, it's just another form of, capitalism and attention seeking and ways to just aggrandize ourselves and make ourselves seem self-righteous rather than trying to fix the world. Because that's what the direction of the third episode sort of went. Like, no white saviors went from being this online advocacy group against white supremacy to being a coffee / book club / open house venue, right? Like, okay, so we're just replicating capitalism instead of just trying to reform or revolutionize this society, right? Like, that's the thing about, I wanted to say about no white saviors before I go.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I'm just wondering, like, why didn't they pick, or why didn't that, like, Ugandan woman find, a black American to have an organization with? But it was because probably Kelsey introduced herself in a certain way that made her say, like, oh, okay, this white person is different. She's one of the good ones. Which, like, she can be. I mean, maybe she realized her mistake. I don't know.
Right.
Maybe she had another revelation.
Yeah.
Or maybe she's like now at a Trump rally saying like, you know, I try to help black people, but they kicked me out, so I
Yeah.
hate them now.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like
That's
it could go
wild.
like either way,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, I think like it's just at the end turned into like two white people discussing about a thing that is not about them.
Mm. Yeah. And
And
the
they sort
Ugandan
of like,
voices got
yeah,
muffled.
yeah, they took the Ugandans out of the conversation.
Yeah. That's crazy.
And
That's
that was
crazy.
like the problematic part.
Yeah, yeah. And one more thing I gotta say, like as somebody who, traveled a lot through Africa and also lived in Africa as well, seeing Renee's story also reminded me of myself. Cause like I became an English teacher when I just said, hey, I speak English, and they just pushed me into a room full of kids and said, teach nigga. So like seeing Renee go through that, it sort of like reminded me that in Africa, it's sort of like anything goes. It's the wild, wild west in Africa. And if you know where to go or who to talk to or just find yourself tripping over a rock, you can end up doing something that you didn't expect. Because to some degree, there are rules in Africa, but then there's what actually goes down. And TIA, this is Africa. If you know, you know. You get what I'm saying? So that's one of
Yeah.
the issues. It's one of the beautiful things, but also one of the issues of Africa, I would say. What do you
I
think?
mean, it's beautiful if you have the right mindset, right? And good
Mm,
intentions. Like, you didn't have any intention to go into the classroom and teach these kids slur words, let's say. I don't know.
right. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And you were actually trying to learn how to teach. And
Mm,
that creates like a learning experience for you, an opportunity for you to make a living, but plus also learning about a profession
mm,
that you want to do. But if you don't have the right mindset, like it's dangerous.
right,
If
right.
you're like just trying to scam people or take advantage of people, so it's just like depends on your personal motivation.
Right, right. Like I'm just trying to imagine, somebody else who walked the path that I walked, but then they walk into the classroom and they start abusing kids, right? Like that could happen. And that's sort of like what Renee walked into. She came in there, like you said, with good intentions to feed kids. And because she has a twisted mindset, she ended up sticking them full of IVs and all sorts of medicines and toxins and stuff like that, right? So yeah, you just gotta check yourself, check yourself. Cause it's very easy for people almost from anywhere, which is why Africa is like so wide open for people that make so much money and opportunity. Because it's so easy for people that come from any other part of the world to go to Africa and feel like, oh, I'm superior to these people. I know better than these people. And that's why all the Indians, the Chinese, the Arabs, the whites, other black people from the diaspora go to Africa and they, turn up their hustle and they make businesses and stuff like that because they say, oh, the Africans don't know how to do this. Let me show them with my knowledge from my superior civilization. You get what I'm saying? And we have
Yeah.
to check ourselves from thinking that. Go ahead.
Yeah, definitely. Like you said, we have to check ourselves.
Yeah. Yep, yep, yep. So any other comments before we wrap it up?
No, I think I said everything.
All right, all right. Final score?
Final score, I think it's a very good documentary. Um, as a documentary, like cinematically, I'm gonna give it like a 8.5.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay.
Like plus the story as well.
Okay. I'm going to give it a 7.5 because those tiny yellow subtitles at the bottom were really pissing me off.
Yeah, I mean, that was also like sort of like the fault of our player as well, I guess.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. But overall, good documentary. I would recommend everybody watch it. It's an interesting story to understand and something that could teach us, about how we're dealing with Africa and the Christian culture in America and how toxic it is.
Yep.
All right. Well, this has been episode 61 of Simon and Acting Movie Reviews. Y'all stay tuned for more. If you have any suggestions, send them our way. Be easy out there. Peace.